All right, welcome back to the Art 2 students. You might remember that last time we met together, whether virtually or in person, you learned about two-point perspective. We started with a horizon line right through the middle, and it represents the eye level of our view. That means that anything we end up placing above it is going to be exposed at the bottom. Anything we put below our eye is going to be exposed at the top. This is true of all things in reality, things like cubes or whatever other forms we're looking at. Then, after we talked about that, we went ahead and set two vanishing points because it's two-point perspective. And what we learned is that the vanishing points represent the furthest place our eye can see. It's the most distant place in the illusion, and obviously we have two of those. So anytime we want to express depth in our illusion, we're going to be using the concept of what's called a converging line. Converge means to join together, and those lines are always going to join together at one of the two vanishing points. So converging lines show depth. They replace our horizontal lines in this illusion because there are no horizontal lines. There are no lines that are facing directly at us. That would be one-point perspective. So every time we draw in two-point, if there's any kind of cube at all, it's going to be angled at us the way an open book might appear. So our converging lines are angling to the left and to the right of the composition. This middle piece here that we always start with, I call the spine. It's a vertical line that represents height. So the vertical lines are for the height. Okay? The width is shown in the depth lines. So that's the tricky part about two-point, is that width and depth are kind of one and the same here. They're not going to end up being separate things. So anyway, how we start our sequence of building a cube in two-point, just as a refresher, is to do a vertical line, and we should use our ruler typically if we're going to do it correctly. Place it at the bottom of your page so that it's nice and even, and then trace it. I forgot I have this little hole, not hole punch, whatever that is, little brad. So I'm going to connect it here instead. All right, so if I want the corner of my box to be right here, then I place my ruler against the bottom of my page to get my vertical. Then I go ahead and I connect the top of this book spine type of shape. I call it a spine a lot of times because it reminds me of the spine of a book. I place a converging line at the top of it going to each vanishing point. Now, you know I'm going to erase parts of this, so I'm not going to go all the way. I'm just going to give myself some distance. So you do that at the top and the bottom. This may have happened to you. If you got really close to being underneath one of your vanishing points, your angles are going to look really, really acute, really steep. And that's going to be awkward, and if you're new to it, you might feel as though you're doing something wrong, but as long as you're still using your vanishing point, you're actually doing it perfectly fine. This one is way further out, and so the angle's more obtuse, and it's going to look more natural to me. Again, both are correct. All right, and then we finish that step by chopping the form. Right now, it would just be going on forever if I had actually drawn all the way to the vanishing point. So I'm going to chop with a vertical. Okay, another one of those blue lines. So this is where I'm going to choose to stop my form. You can already kind of tell from just doing this a lot of times. I kind of knew where it would line up, and I'm going to chop those there as well. line it up with the bottom of your page, nice and even, so you get a true vertical, otherwise it will throw off your whole box. And now you have that book that we were just referring to over here. Okay, so the book is turned away from us. One side is angled a lot more away from us than the other. That's fine. That just has to do with where it's positioned in the composition. Now what I got to do is the crisscross step. So start with the spine, converge both top and bottom to each vanishing point, and then crisscross what's left to the opposite vanishing points. So I'm going to go from this side towards my purple vanishing point, and from that side to my orange vanishing point. The more accurate, the better it ends up looking, the more convincing the illusion. My ruler doesn't even quite reach, so I'm just going to do my best estimate on that angle. It's pretty close, so I think we'll all be okay with that. All right, and then if you're not using those converging lines for anything, you can erase them. So that was just like a quick review. Now, today, your new task is to go ahead and use some existing converging lines to create a continuation of the box form. I want to show you that so you can see how you can use it as a shortcut. If you've already erased those spider webbing converging lines that you would have had, that's all right. You can actually just bring them right back. So wherever you want to do this exercise today, and hopefully you have time to do it multiple times, you could just draw them right back in. You don't necessarily need to do both left and right, so just kind of pick one and go with it. So I think I'll show you how to do the technique on this one. Since I use the tool, it's more accurate looking. So just to be thorough, these are my vertical lines. You can tell because they're perpendicular with the bottom of my page. I've got my purple converging lines that go to the right, and then my orange converging lines that are going to the left. All right, now what I'd like to do is show you the new content. All right, so if you needed to build a city or some other kind of continuing form, there's so many applications for that. You could simply start by examining what's going on between the two converging lines back here, and then imagine you're a computer, you could just copy and paste it further down. So how would I paste that further down? I wouldn't necessarily try to make it parallel. What I would do is I would copy the nature of what it's doing. It's pointing to that vanishing point, the orange one, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my ruler out, and I'm going to angle it to that vanishing point and start making some lines across those first two converging lines. So it's as though I copied and pasted that in a sense. They're both pointing to the orange. I'm going to do that several times. If you wanted it to look like the same kind of exact form continuing, then you would just want to shrink the space each time so that it looks like it's exactly the same form disappearing and getting smaller. However, if it's a real city or some kind of other, more diverse kind of design and imagery, you don't necessarily have to do that rule. You could have a longer building back here for whatever reason. Maybe it's just extremely long. I'm just going to stop there. I don't want to go and do a million of them. The next thing we're going to do is repeat that concept here with the vertical line. So the vertical expressed in blue is going to be copied and pasted right here, straight down. So again, if you want to practice using your ruler to get an accurate line, just place your ruler against the bottom of your page. Make sure it's really truly even, and then snug it up here against the corner that you're creating and drop that line straight down. Scoot it back and continue. So this should seem pretty familiar if you were with me in two-dimensional Art 1 and did one-point perspective. Really, that's one of the beautiful things about continuing in this class is so much of our learning expands and builds on the previous learning, even semester to semester. So while we're doing more challenging things and more diverse things, in some ways it's easier because you're already familiar with it. So you may know where I'm heading next. When we learned this in one point, the very next thing we learned how to do was how to remove a piece out of the middle. So I called that interrupting the form. We wanted to know how to take out a building. So obviously the first step is going to be to erase a section of converging lines to create that separation between the forms. And then once you've done that, you have to ask yourself what's missing here, because it's a little too empty. These almost just look like hollow forms. They are missing the rest of their appearance there. So again, the answer is always in the front of the form. Go back to the front again. We already know we did the orange here, and we know that we did the blue here. So what we're missing is another orange and another blue. So another converging line going to our left and another vertical line going down. It doesn't really matter which one you choose to address first. You're going to have to see where they crisscross against each other or intersect. So it's up to you. You might give yourself a little extra if you're not sure. And then when you do your vertical against the bottom of your page, slide it over to that corner, drop the line down, and then wherever it intersects is the back corner. Sometimes they'll be closer together, and maybe that is going behind this. That's fine, obviously. It's just a different placement, and that's good if you run into both scenarios. It prepares you for both. So now we have an interruption between. Little stick guy could go for a walk and end up on the other side of those buildings. That's the main skill I want you to pick up today, but obviously I don't want you doing it just once with me. I want you repeating it as many times as you can. Notice that each of my cubes I did from the previous exercise are a little bit different than each other in proportion. I probably could have exaggerated those differences even more. Like I wish I would have made a really tall, skinny one, and I kind of just forgot to. So start playing around with proportions and play around with placement. Intentionally put some close to the vanishing point. That way you're forced to deal with these awkward angles as we're learning, and you can practice working through that and problem solving. Put several in a row, create several interruptions, and then of course take a photo of your work and send me that so I can see evidence of not only one example where you did it with me, but several others where you've done it on your own. And that's what I'm looking for today for your schoolwork. Guys, if you have any questions, just feel free to send that to me. Remember that this paper is just a learning exercise, not necessarily a work of art, so feel free to turn it around, do wild and weird things with it, and hopefully have fun along the way. Good luck, guys.